The wagon train had been traveling for 3 days through the harsh Arizona desert when the attack came. Sarah Mitchell clutched her baby sister close to her chest as the sound of war cries filled the air. The Apache warriors appeared like shadows from behind the Red Canyon walls, their painted faces fierce in the blazing afternoon sun. Her father, Thomas Mitchell, grabbed his rifle and shouted for everyone to take cover behind the wagons. But it was too late. The Apache had planned this attack carefully, surrounding the small group of settlers who had foolishly taken the shorter route through Apache territory. Sarah watched in horror as her father fell, struck down by an arrow. Her mother screamed and tried to run toward him, but another warrior caught her. The baby in Sarah's arms cried loudly, and she pressed her hand gently over the tiny mouth, knowing that any sound could mean death for both of them. The battle was over quickly. The Apache were skilled fighters, and the settlers were no match for their speed and knowledge of the land. Sarah crouched behind a wooden crate, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst. She could hear the warriors talking in their native language, their voices growing closer. A tall Apache warrior with long black hair and sharp eyes found her hiding place. He wore leather clothing decorated with beads and feathers, and his face was painted with red and black stripes. Sarah looked up at him with tears in her eyes, holding her baby sister protectively. The warrior stared at her for a long moment. Sarah was 18 years old with golden hair that caught the sunlight and blue eyes that reminded him of the sky after a storm. Something in her brave expression, even in the face of death, made him pause. Other Apache warriors approached, speaking rapidly in their language. Sarah understood from their gestures that they were deciding what to do with the survivors. She had heard terrible stories about what happened to captives, especially young women. The tall warrior looked at Sarah again. There was something different about this one, something that made him want to protect rather than harm. He had never felt this way about a white woman before, but something in her eyes spoke to him. Sarah noticed that this warrior seemed to be their leader. The other men waited for his decisions and followed his commands. She realized that her life and her baby sister's life might depend on what this man decided to do with them. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the desert. The Apache gathered the few survivors together, including Sarah and her baby sister. They also took several other young women from the wagon train. Sarah watched as the warriors loaded their horses with supplies from the wagons. They moved with purpose and efficiency, like they had done this many times before. She wondered if she would ever see civilization again, or if she would die in this desert. The tall warrior approached Sarah again. He spoke a few words in English, his voice deep and commanding. "You come," he said simply. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Sarah stood up slowly, still holding her baby sister. She looked around at the destroyed wagon train, at the bodies of people she had known and traveled with. Everything she had ever known was gone, destroyed in a matter of minutes. The warrior gestured toward a painted horse nearby. Sarah realized he expected her to ride with him. She had no choice but to obey. As they prepared to leave, she took one last look at the place where her old life had ended and her new uncertain future was about to begin. The Apache band began moving toward the mountains as darkness fell. Sarah rode behind the tall warrior, her arms wrapped around her baby sister. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she was determined to survive whatever came next. The desert wind blew through her hair as they disappeared into the night, leaving the destroyed wagon train behind them. The Apache village was hidden deep in a canyon, protected by tall red rocks that seemed to touch the sky. Sarah had been riding for 2 days and her body ached from the long journey. The baby had cried often, but somehow they had both survived the difficult trip through the desert. As they entered the village, Sarah saw dozens of wickiups, the traditional Apache homes made from wooden poles and covered with brush and animal hides. Children ran alongside the horses, curious about the new captives. Women stopped their work to stare at the pale-skinned strangers. The tall warrior, whose name Sarah learned was Aishan, which meant little boy in Apache, helped her down from his horse. Despite his fearsome reputation as a warrior, he was surprisingly gentle with her and the baby. An older Apache woman approached them. Her face was weathered by years in the sun, and her dark eyes were filled with suspicion. She spoke rapidly to Aishan in Apache, clearly not happy about his decision to bring the white captives to their village. Aishan responded firmly, his voice carrying the authority of a leader. Sarah understood that they were arguing about her fate. The older woman pointed at Sarah and the baby several times, her voice growing more angry. Other Apache gathered around to watch the discussion. Sarah noticed that some of the warriors who had participated in the raid were also arguing with Aishan. She began to understand that bringing her here was not a popular decision among his people. A distinguished older man with gray hair and many decorative ornaments approached the group. Sarah sensed immediately that this was someone very important, perhaps the chief of the tribe. He looked at her with intelligent eyes, studying her carefully. The older man spoke quietly with Aishan. Their conversation was serious and lasted several minutes. Sarah watched their faces, trying to understand what was being decided about her future. Finally, the older man nodded toward a small wickiup at the edge of the village. Aishan took Sarah's arm and led her toward it. The older woman followed, still muttering in Apache, clearly unhappy with whatever decision had been made. Inside the small dwelling, Sarah found simple furnishings, woven baskets, animal skins for sleeping, and a small fire pit in the center. It was basic but clean and dry. Aishan gestured for her to sit down, then brought her a bowl of water and some dried meat. The baby was hungry and fussing. Sarah tried to comfort her, but without proper food or milk, she worried that her little sister might not survive much longer. She looked at Aishan with desperate eyes, trying to communicate her need without words. Aishan seemed to understand. He left the wickiup and returned a short time later with a young Apache woman who had recently given birth. The woman looked uncertain but approached Sarah with kindness. She gestured toward the crying baby and then toward herself. Sarah realized that this woman was offering to feed her baby sister. It was a generous act that could save the child's life. With tears of gratitude, Sarah allowed the Apache woman to take the baby and nurse her. Over the following days, Sarah began to understand the rhythms of village life. The women worked together to prepare food, make clothing, and care for children. The men hunted, protected the village, and made weapons and tools. Sarah was given simple tasks like gathering firewood and helping with food preparation. Some of the women were kind to her, while others remained suspicious and unfriendly. She learned a few basic Apache words and began to understand some of their customs. Aishan visited her wickiup each evening. He would sit by her fire and sometimes bring food or small gifts. He spoke little English, but Sarah sensed that he was trying to make her feel less frightened. During these visits, Sarah noticed that Aishan was respected but also questioned by his people. She understood that his decision to keep her alive and bring her to the village had created tension within the tribe. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Sarah heard angry voices outside. Several warriors had gathered near her wickiup and their discussion was becoming heated. She saw Aishan's jaw tighten as he listened to their complaints. Sarah realized that some of the warriors wanted her removed from the village. They saw her as a threat, a reminder of the conflict between their people and the white settlers who continued to invade their lands. Aishan stood up and faced the other warriors. His voice was calm but firm as he spoke to them. Sarah could see the respect they had for him, but also their frustration with his decision to protect her. After the other warriors left, Aishan sat down again beside Sarah. He looked into the fire for a long time before speaking. "They want you gone," he said slowly in his limited English. "But you stay. You are mine now." His words were simple, but Sarah understood their meaning. Aishan had claimed her as his responsibility, his property according to Apache custom. This protected her from the other warriors, but it also bound her to him completely. Weeks passed in the Apache village and Sarah began to adapt to her new life. The baby, whom the Apache women had named Ayana, meaning eternal blossom, was growing stronger under the care of the nursing mother, Nalnish. Sarah was grateful for this kindness, even though she missed being able to care for her sister herself. Sarah learned that Aishan was not just any warrior, but the war chief's son and a respected leader among his people. His father, the man she had seen on her first day, was Chief Cochise, a name that struck fear into the hearts of settlers across the territory. The Apache way of life was harsh but had its own beauty. Sarah watched the women create intricate beadwork and weave strong baskets. She learned to identify plants that could be eaten or used for medicine. The desert, which had once seemed like a wasteland to her, revealed its secrets slowly. Aishan began teaching her Apache words during their evening visits. He would point to objects and say their names, waiting patiently as she repeated them. Sarah, in return, taught him more English words. These language lessons became a bridge between their two very different worlds. During one of these sessions, Sarah gathered courage to ask about her fate. "What will happen to me?" she asked, looking directly into his dark eyes. Aishan was quiet for a long moment. "White soldiers come soon," he said finally. "They look for you, for others taken. When they come, there will be fighting." Sarah felt a chill of fear. Will you let me go back to them?" Aishan's expression hardened. "You are not prisoner. You are—" He struggled to find the English word, then spoke in Apache. Sarah had learned enough to understand he was saying she belonged to him, but not as a slave. The relationship he described was more complex, more personal. "I don't understand," Sarah said softly. Aishan stood up and walked to the opening of the wiki-up. He looked out at the star-filled desert sky before turning back to her. "In my dreams, I see you before the attack. Spirit tells me you are meant to be here." Sarah stared at him in surprise. She had heard that Apache people believe strongly in visions and spiritual guidance, but she had never expected to be part of such beliefs. "My people think I am foolish," Aishan continued. "They say white woman will bring bad luck, that soldiers will follow and destroy village. But I know you are different. You have strong spirit." Over the following days, Sarah noticed changes in how some of the Apache treated her. A few of the women began including her more in their daily activities. Children, who had initially been afraid of her pale skin and light hair, began to approach her with curiosity. Sarah found herself particularly drawn to an elderly Apache woman named Desba, who seemed to be the village's healer and wise woman. Despite speaking no English, Desba communicated with Sarah through gestures and expressions. She taught Sarah which plants could heal wounds and which could reduce fever. One afternoon, while Sarah was helping Desba gather medicinal herbs, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Sarah's heart jumped, thinking it might be rescue, but she saw immediately that these were Apache warriors returning from a scouting mission. The warriors brought disturbing news. A large group of soldiers was traveling through the area, searching for the captured settlers. They were asking questions at trading posts and had offered a reward for information about the missing people. That evening, the entire village gathered for a council meeting. Sarah sat outside her wiki-up, listening to the passionate discussions even though she couldn't understand most of the words. She could sense the tension and fear in the voices. Aishan came to her later that night, his face serious. "Soldiers are close," he told her. "Tomorrow we may need to move deeper into mountains." "What about me and Ayana?" Sarah asked, referring to her baby sister by the Apache name. Aishan looked at her steadily. "You come with us." "But Sarah?" He paused, using her English name for the first time. "If soldiers find us, there will be fighting. Many will die." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility. Her presence in the village was putting all these people at risk. "Maybe I should go back to them," she whispered. "Maybe that would be safer for everyone." Aishan's eyes flashed with something that looked like pain. "You want to leave?" Sarah looked around the wiki-up that had become her home, thought about Nalnish, who had saved her sister's life, about Desba, who had taught her so much, about the children who now smiled at her. "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted. "When soldiers come," Aishan said quietly, "choice will be yours. But know this, if you stay as Apache. If you go forever." That night, Sarah lay awake listening to the sounds of the village preparing for possible departure. She realized that her feelings about this place, about these people, and especially about Aishan, had become far more complicated than she had ever expected. She was no longer simply a captive waiting for rescue. Somehow, in ways she didn't fully understand, she had begun to belong here. The thought both terrified and comforted her as she drifted off to sleep, wondering what tomorrow would bring. The morning sun was just beginning to light the canyon walls when the Apache scouts returned with urgent news. The soldiers were less than a day's ride away, and they were moving directly toward the village. Chief Kuchais immediately called for a council of war. Sarah watched from her wiki-up as warriors painted their faces and checked their weapons. The women began packing essential supplies, ready to flee deeper into the mountains if necessary. The mood in the village was tense, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Nalnish brought baby Ayana to Sarah, speaking rapidly in Apache. Sarah understood that the nursing mother was afraid and wanted to make sure the baby was safe. Sarah held her little sister close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest. Aishan appeared at her dwelling, his face painted with the traditional war colors of black and red. He looked fierce and dangerous, reminding Sarah that despite their growing closeness, he was still a deadly Apache warrior. Soldiers come by sunset, he told her. Chief says all captives must be hidden in sacred caves. You will be safe there. Sarah stood up, still holding the baby. What about you?
Will you be safe?
Something flickered in Aishan's eyes at her concern for him. Apache know these mountains. Soldiers do not. We will survive. As the day progressed, Sarah helped the other women prepare for the worst. She packed food and blankets, trying to be useful despite not knowing if she would be fleeing with them or returning to her own people. In the late afternoon, the sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. Sarah's heart pounded as she recognized the familiar sound of cavalry horses and the jingle of military equipment. Part of her felt hope. These were her people come to rescue her. But another part of her felt fear for the Apache who had become her protectors. A young Apache warrior ran into the village, speaking urgently to Chief Cochise. Sarah caught enough words to understand that the soldiers had found the canyon entrance and were approaching under a white flag of truce. Chief Cochise made a decision. Rather than hiding, he would meet with the soldiers openly. He was confident in his position, protected by the canyon walls and his knowledge of the terrain. Sarah watched from inside her wickiup as a small group of cavalry soldiers entered the village. They were led by a tall officer with a graying beard and tired eyes. Sarah recognized him as Captain Morrison, who had been at Fort Apache when her family's wagon train had passed through. The soldiers looked nervous, surrounded by painted Apache warriors. Captain Morrison's eyes swept the village, clearly searching for signs of the missing captives. Chief Cochise greeted the soldiers formally, speaking in broken English. "You come to my home," he said. "What do you want?" Captain Morrison stepped forward. "We're looking for settlers taken from the wagon train 3 weeks ago. We know some of them are here." "No settlers here," Chief Cochise replied calmly. Sarah could see the frustration in Captain Morrison's face. She knew he didn't believe the chief, but he also couldn't search the village without starting a battle he might not win. "We have reports," the captain insisted. "A young woman with blonde hair traveling with a baby. Her name is Sarah Mitchell. We know she was taken alive." Sarah felt Aishan tense beside her wickiup. She realized he was positioned where he could see both her and the soldiers, ready to protect her if necessary. Chief Cochise shrugged. "Many raids. Many captives taken, sold, traded. Some die, some live. Cannot remember all names." Captain Morrison looked around the village again. "I'm prepared to offer trade goods for the return of any survivors. Blankets, food, weapons." At this, several Apache warriors muttered among themselves. Sarah understood that trade goods were valuable to the tribe, especially with winter approaching. Chief Cochise considered the offer. "What you give for one white woman and baby?" Sarah's breath caught. The chief was negotiating for her return. She looked through a crack in her wickiup wall and saw Aishan's face. His expression was carefully controlled, but she could see the tension in his posture. 20 horses, 50 blankets, 2 cases of rifles, and ammunition, Captain Morrison offered. It was a generous offer, more than most captives would bring. Sarah realized that her family must have been more important than she had known, or perhaps the army was desperate to show they could protect settlers. Chief Cochise spoke quietly with his advisors, including Aishan. Sarah watched as they debated in Apache. She caught some words. They were discussing the value of the trade versus the risk of keeping her. Finally, Chief Cochise turned back to Captain Morrison. "We consider your offer. You wait outside canyon until morning. Then we give answer." Captain Morrison clearly wanted to press the issue, but he was outnumbered and in hostile territory. "Very well. But I want proof that Sarah Mitchell is alive and unharmed." Chief Cochise nodded to one of his warriors who disappeared among the wickiups. A moment later he returned with a piece of fabric, torn from Sarah's original dress. Captain Morrison examined it closely. Sarah recognized it as part of the blue calico dress she had been wearing during the attack. "This could be from anyone's dress," he said skeptically. Chief Cochise smiled slightly. "White woman say tell you she remembers Captain Morrison from Fort Apache. She say you have scar on left hand from Apache arrow." Captain Morrison looked down at his left hand, where indeed a pale scar was visible. His expression showed he was convinced. "I'll return tomorrow morning for your answer." As the soldiers prepared to leave, Sarah saw Captain Morrison look directly at her wickiup. For a moment, she thought he might have seen her, but he turned away without speaking. After the soldiers left, the village erupted in discussion. Sarah could hear voices raised in argument throughout the evening. She knew they were debating her fate, weighing the generous trade offer against whatever reasons Aishan had for wanting to keep her. As darkness fell, Aishan came to her wickiup. He sat down heavily, looking exhausted from the day's tensions. "They offer much for you," he said quietly. Sarah nodded. "I heard. It's a good offer for your people." Aishan looked at her intently. "Is that what you want? To go back?" Sarah held his gaze, realizing that her answer would change everything for both of them. "I want to know what you want, Aishan." "Do you want me to go?" The Apache warrior was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke in a voice so low she had to strain to hear it. "In morning, choice will be made. But tonight?" He paused, struggling with the English words. "Tonight you are still mine." Sarah barely slept that night. She lay in her wickiup listening to the sounds of the village. Hushed conversations, the occasional whinny of horses and the crackling of dying fires. She knew that by morning, her fate would be decided. As the first light of dawn touched the canyon walls, Sarah heard movement throughout the village. The Apache were preparing for the return of Captain Morrison and his soldiers. She dressed carefully in the Apache clothing she had been given, a doeskin dress decorated with beads and fringe, much more practical than her original settler's dress. Nalnish brought baby Ayana to her for what might be the last time. Sarah held her little sister close, breathing in her sweet scent. The baby had grown so much in their weeks with the Apache. She was healthy and alert, thanks to Nalnish's care. "If I go back," Sarah said to Nalnish in halting Apache, "will you keep caring for her?" Nalnish's eyes filled with tears. She had grown to love the baby as her own. She nodded, then spoke rapidly, telling Sarah that Ayana would always be welcome among the Apache. Would always have a home and family here. Chief Cochise summoned Sarah to join the council before the soldiers arrived. She walked nervously to the center of the village, where the most important men of the tribe had gathered. Aishan stood among them, his face unreadable. "White woman," Chief Cochise said in English. "Soldiers offer much for you and baby. Good trade for my people, but my son says you should choose for yourself." Sarah looked around the circle of Apache men. These were the same warriors who had attacked her wagon train, killed her parents, and destroyed her old life. Yet now they were treating her with respect, giving her a voice in her own future. "What are my choices?" Sarah asked. "You go back to White World," Chief Cochise explained. "Live with your people, marry white man, have white children. Forget Apache ways," he paused, studying her face. "Or you stay here. Become Apache woman, learn our medicine, our songs. Marry Apache man." His eyes flickered toward Aishan. "Have Apache children?" Sarah's heart raced. The choice was clearer than she had expected, but also more difficult. Return to the world she had known, or stay in this harsh but beautiful place that had begun to feel like home. "The baby," she said. "What about Ayana?" "Baby stays here either way," Chief Cochise said firmly. "She is Apache now. Nalnish is her mother. But if you stay, you can help raise her. If you go, you say goodbye forever." The weight of this decision hit Sarah like a physical blow. She could return to civilization, but she would have to abandon her baby sister forever. Or she could stay and help raise Ayana, but she would be giving up any chance of returning to her former life. The sound of approaching horses interrupted her thoughts. Captain Morrison and his soldiers were returning as promised. "Choose now," Chief Cochise said quietly. Sarah looked at Aishan. His dark eyes held hers, and she saw something there she had not expected. Vulnerability. This proud, fierce warrior was afraid of her answer. "Time," Sarah whispered. "I need more time." "No time," Chief Cochise said. "Soldiers here now." Captain Morrison entered the village with a small escort, looking determined. He carried a pack filled with trade goods as a sign of good faith. "Chief Cochise," he called out formally, "I've returned for your answer." The Apache chief gestured for Sarah to step forward. She walked slowly toward the group of soldiers, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Captain Morrison's eyes widened when he saw her. "Miss Mitchell? Sarah, is that you?" Sarah looked down at herself. Her Apache clothing, her sun-darkened skin, her hair now braided in the Apache style. She probably looked very different from the terrified girl who had been captured weeks ago. "Yes, Captain," she said quietly. "Thank God you're alive," Morrison said with obvious relief. "Are you hurt?" Have they harmed you? No, Sarah replied. They have treated me well. Captain Morrison looked confused by her calm demeanor. He had expected to find a traumatized victim desperate for rescue. And the baby? Your sister? She is well too, Sarah said, not mentioning that Ayanna was not present. Then gather your things, Morrison said briskly. We're taking you home. Sarah felt the eyes of the entire village on her. Apache warriors stood ready for battle if negotiations went wrong. Women held their children close, understanding that Sarah's decision could affect all their lives. She looked back at Aishan one more time. He stood perfectly still, but she could see his hands clenched at his sides. He was waiting just like everyone else. Captain Morrison noticed her hesitation. Sarah, what is it? Are you afraid? We'll protect you. Sarah took a deep breath. Captain Morrison, I need to tell you something. I need you to understand my choice. Your choice? Morrison looked puzzled. Miss Mitchell, you're a captive. You don't have choices here. That's where you're wrong, Sarah said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent village. I do have a choice. And I choose... She paused, looking one more time at the Apache faces around her, at the canyon walls that had protected her, at Aishan who had saved her life and changed her heart. I choose to stay. The silence that followed her words was deafening. Captain Morrison stared at her in shock while whispers ran through the Apache gathered around them. Miss Mitchell, you can't be serious, Morrison said. These are savages. They killed your parents. These people saved my life, Sarah replied firmly. They cared for my baby sister when she was dying. They taught me to survive. They gave me a home. She walked toward Aishan, her decision made. I'm not a captive anymore, Captain Morrison. I'm Apache now. Aishan's face showed a mixture of joy and relief. He stepped forward and took Sarah's hand, a gesture that clearly demonstrated his claim on her to both Apache and soldiers. Captain Morrison looked frustrated and confused. Sarah, think about what you're doing. Think about your future, your reputation. You can't throw away your entire life for these people. Sarah smiled sadly. My old life is already gone, Captain. This is my new life now. Captain Morrison left the village that day with his soldiers, but without Sarah. He warned that the army would not give up easily, that there would be consequences for harboring a white woman. Chief Cochise listened respectfully but made it clear that Sarah had made her choice freely. After the soldiers departed, the mood in the village changed completely. Sarah's decision to stay had been a powerful statement of loyalty to the Apache people. Even those who had been suspicious of her began to treat her with new respect. That evening, Chief Cochise called Sarah and Aishan to his fire. The old chief studied them both carefully before speaking. White woman chooses Apache life, he said. My son protects white woman. Now must make this bond proper in Apache way. Sarah understood what he was suggesting. If she was going to stay and live as an Apache, her relationship with Aishan needed to be formalized according to their customs. Apache marriage, not like white marriage, Chief Cochise explained, is joining of families, of spirits, is sacred bond that cannot be broken easily. Sarah looked at Aishan, trying to read his expression. Is this what you want? She asked him. Aishan nodded slowly. I want you as my wife, not as captive. I want you to choose me freely, as I choose you. The Apache marriage ceremony took place 3 days later. Sarah learned that Apache weddings were simple but meaningful affairs. The entire village participated in the preparations. Desba, the old medicine woman, took charge of preparing Sarah for the ceremony. She painted special symbols on Sarah's face and hands using clay and plant dyes. These symbols, she explained through gestures and the few Apache words Sarah understood, would protect her marriage and bring good fortune. Nalnish brought baby Ayanna to be part of the ceremony. The little girl had grown strong and healthy under Apache care. Sarah held her sister during part of the ritual, symbolizing that Ayanna was also joining this new family. The ceremony itself took place at sunset, when the canyon walls glowed red and gold. Sarah wore a beautiful dress made of white doeskin, decorated with intricate beadwork that the Apache women had created especially for her wedding. Aishan appeared wearing his finest clothing, a shirt decorated with porcupine quills, leather leggings with silver conchos, and a magnificent headdress with eagle feathers. He looked every inch the proud Apache warrior. Chief Cochise conducted the ceremony, speaking in Apache and occasionally translating for Sarah's benefit. He talked about the joining of two spirits, the importance of respect and loyalty, and the responsibilities of married life in Apache society. The most important part of the ceremony was the sharing of blessed corn mush. Sarah and Aishan each ate from the same bowl, symbolizing that they would share all things in life, good times and bad, plenty and scarcity. The Apache people celebrated with singing and dancing that continued long into the night. Sarah watched, amazed by the beauty and complexity of their songs and dances. Each told a story, preserved the history of the people, or honored the spirits that guided their lives. An older Apache man played a traditional courting flute, its haunting melody echoing off the canyon walls. Young unmarried people danced together, while married couples sat around fires sharing food and conversation. Sarah noticed that her marriage to Aishan had changed how the other Apache women treated her. She was no longer an outsider or even a protected captive. She was now the wife of an important warrior, with a recognized place in the tribe's social structure. During the celebration, Desba approached Sarah with a special gift, a medicine bag made of soft leather and decorated with beautiful beadwork. Inside were herbs and small objects that would protect Sarah and her new family from harm. "Now you are daughter to me," Desba said in Apache, and Sarah understood both the words and the deep meaning behind them. She had gained not just a husband, but an entire extended family. As the evening grew late, Aishan led Sarah away from the celebration to a new wickiup that had been prepared for them. It was larger than her old dwelling and furnished with beautiful blankets, baskets, and other wedding gifts from the tribe. Inside their new home, Sarah and Aishan sat together by their own fire for the first time as husband and wife. The sounds of continuing celebration drifted from the village, but they were alone at last. "Are you happy with your choice?" Aishan asked, speaking partly in Apache and partly in English. Sarah looked around their dwelling, thought about the ceremony, the acceptance of the tribe, and the man sitting beside her. "Yes," she said simply. "I am happy." Aishan reached for her hand. "I will be good husband to you. I will protect you and any children we have. I will teach you all Apache ways so you can be strong woman among my people." Sarah squeezed his hand. "And I will learn. I will be worthy of the name you gave me, of the life you offered me." During the ceremony, Chief Cochise had given Sarah a new name, Nahastzan, meaning Earth Woman, because she had chosen to make this land her home. It was a beautiful name, and Sarah felt honored to receive it. That night, as they lay together in their new home, Sarah listened to the sounds of the desert, the call of nightbirds, the distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of wind through the canyon. These sounds no longer seemed foreign or frightening. They were the sounds of home. She thought briefly about her old life, about the world she had left behind. Sometimes she wondered what Captain Morrison had reported, whether anyone in the settlements would understand her choice. But those thoughts seemed to belong to someone else now, to the frightened girl who had hidden behind a wagon during an Apache attack. That girl was gone forever. In her place was Nahastzan, wife of Aishan, daughter of the Apache people, mother to baby Ayana. 2 years had passed since Sarah became Nahazan, and her life had transformed completely. She now spoke Apache fluently, and had learned the complex skills needed to survive in the desert. Her hands, once soft from a sheltered life, were now strong from weaving baskets, tanning hides, and gathering wild plants for food and medicine. The greatest joy in her new life was watching baby Ayana grow into a healthy, happy Apache child. The little girl called both Sarah and Nalnish mother in Apache, not understanding the difference. She had dark hair like the other Apache children and spoke only a few words of English that Sarah had secretly taught her. Sarah often watched Ayana playing with the other children, running freely through the village, learning traditional games and songs. The child belonged here completely, and Sarah knew she had made the right choice in staying to be part of her sister's life. Her marriage to Aishan had grown stronger with each passing season. He was a patient teacher, showing her how to read the signs in nature that meant the difference between life and death in the desert. She learned to identify which plants were safe to eat, how to find water during dry seasons, and how to track animals for hunting. In return, Sarah brought her own knowledge to the marriage. Her ability to read and write proved valuable when dealing with traders or government officials. She also taught some of the Apache women basic medical care she had learned from her mother, who had served as an informal nurse in their settlement. The village had moved several times since her wedding, always staying ahead of Army patrols that continued searching for Apache bands. Each time they moved, Sarah helped pack their belongings and set up their new home. She had become skilled at quickly creating a comfortable dwelling from the materials available in their new location. During one particularly difficult winter, when food was scarce and several children fell ill, Sarah's knowledge of European remedies combined with Desba's traditional Apache medicine helped save lives. This earned her even greater respect among the women of the tribe. Sarah discovered she was pregnant during the spring of her second year with the Apache. The news filled her with both joy and worry. She wanted children with Aishan, but she wondered how a child with mixed heritage would be accepted by both Apache and white society. Desba, now like a mother to Sarah, helped her through the pregnancy with traditional herbs and ceremonies. The old medicine woman assured her that the child would be blessed by both Apache and white spirits, making him or her especially strong. When their son was born, he had Aishan's dark hair and eyes but Sarah's lighter skin. Chief Cochise declared that the boy represented the future, a bridge between two worlds. They named him Dahana, meaning he is the one, because he was the first child born of their union. The birth of Dahana marked a new chapter in Sarah's acceptance among the Apache. She was no longer seen as a white woman who had chosen to live with them, but as a true member of the tribe who had contributed to its future. However, their peaceful life was threatened when word came that a new Army colonel had been assigned to the territory. Unlike Captain Morrison, who had eventually given up searching for Sarah, this new officer was determined to capture or kill all Apache in the region. Scouts reported that soldiers were offering large rewards for information about Apache camps. Some of the peaceful Apache bands had already been forced onto reservations, and there were rumors that the government planned to relocate all Apache people far from their traditional lands. During a council meeting, Chief Cochise announced that they would need to move farther into Mexico, where the American Army could not follow. It would be a dangerous journey through some of the harshest desert in the region. Sarah listened to the plans with growing concern. The journey would be especially difficult for families with small children. Baby Dahana was still nursing, and 3-year-old Ayana, though strong, was still very young for such a hard trip. That night, Aishan spoke with Sarah about their options. "We could try to reach my cousin's band in the Sierra Madre Mountains," he suggested. "It would be safe there, but the journey will take many weeks through dangerous country." Sarah held baby Dahana close, thinking about the risks. What about trying to negotiate with the new colonel? Perhaps if I spoke with him, as someone who chose to live with the Apache, I could help him understand that not all Apache are enemies. Aishan shook his head. "This one is different. Scouts say he believes only dead Apache is good Apache. He would probably kill you too for living with us." The decision was made when Apache scouts reported that soldiers were moving toward their canyon. The entire village would leave before dawn, heading south toward Mexico and hopefully safety. As Sarah packed their belongings for what might be their final departure from the land where she had found love and purpose, she reflected on how much her life had changed. The frightened settler girl who had begged not to be taken was gone forever. In her place stood a strong Apache woman, wife to a respected warrior, mother to 2 beautiful children, and valued member of a proud people fighting for their survival. She had found a love deeper than anything she could have imagined, and a sense of belonging she had never known in her previous life. The morning they left the canyon, Sarah took one last look at the place where she had become Nahastan. She carried Dahana in a traditional Apache cradleboard, while Ayana rode on a gentle horse beside her. Aishan rode ahead, scouting for dangers on the trail. As they climbed out of the canyon toward an uncertain future, Sarah felt no regret for the choice she had made years ago. She had chosen love over safety, belonging over comfort, and adventure over predictability. Whatever challenges lay ahead in Mexico or wherever their journey might lead, she would face them as part of an Apache family. The woman who had once pleaded, "Don't let them take me," had instead found herself in a life richer and more meaningful than any she could have imagined. Behind them, the canyon walls caught the morning light one last time, holding the memories of their life there like a sacred trust. Ahead lay the vast desert and mountains, harsh but beautiful, offering the promise of freedom for those brave enough to claim it.